special Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by the Lines and Play Picks. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined as always by my counterpart on the East Coast, Nate Weitzer. And as mentioned, we have a special futures episode for you all today. Just for a little recap, that means we're going to be talking about some of those awards that are going to be coming down and some of the potential, happenings with the teams as well in terms of, potential winners of the championship, even potential to make the playoffs, etc. So we'll be going through some of those options for you that are available right now as we hit the midway point of the season. Just as a reminder, March 25th will be that trade deadline, Nate. So we'll be looking at teams like potentially the Lakers to make a move, get a big man. We'll see, if some other teams try to make a play, including the Celtics and teams like that. But most importantly, Nate, let's talk about the award that everybody loves talking about, starting with the MVP. I know you have a lot of thoughts on that.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, thelines.com, we update futures articles every couple weeks because this is obviously an ever-changing market. The odds are changing and the prospects are changing. So you can go over there and look at my MVP article, which I've been harping for a few weeks now to try to get some money on James Harden at low odds. I didn't understand at all why Kevin Durant was getting better odds than him when he wasn't even playing, and we knew he wasn't going to push too hard as he came off that Achilles. Whereas Harden's playing the best ball of his career. It's not even close. He's averaging 11.4 assists, shooting 42% from three, getting 25 points per game on a 26% usage rate, which is just insane when you think about it. When he won MVP in Houston, he had a 36%. The next year, he had a 40% usage rate. He's just been so efficient, and it's beyond just the numbers too, right? He's just leading this Nets team that is a pretty flawed team in terms of its defense. He hasn't had his sidekicks around too often. There's plenty of games Kyrie has missed during that road trip where the Nets were the stuff of legends, basically because Harden carried them. So, I mean, if you just take those 2 weeks alone, I don't think you can really argue anyone else is the MVP. It's just a question of, can Harden sustain that? Are the other two stars not going to provide as much, be as healthy? And I look at Embiid and Nikola Jokic as the only real challengers. I'm not even considering LeBron James. Like, I don't understand that at all. According by the numbers on Basketball Reference, he has a 3% chance to win unless the Lakers go on some torrid run and win the West. Just not even considering it. Yeah. Those two centers have been extremely valuable, and by the numbers, they are the biggest contenders. So it's really just about the Nuggets and Sixers, which have been far more inconsistent than the Nets. If they can finish with better records, or if the Nets finish with a better record, I think Harden gets that MVP.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it as usual at this point in the season, it is going to come down to how the teams of these players perform in the second half here. So personally, I think safest bet is Embiid, just because you already have the Sixers sitting atop an Eastern Conference that I think they're as good as anyone, including the Nets. I think it is a 2-team race there in the East, and as a result, like we'll see exactly how high those 76ers finish. But the two the next bet in terms of best odds for worth taking at this point to me is also Harden. Like you said, plus 2,500 at DraftKings. And it's going to be that 2-team race for that, the division as well as the conference between the Nets and the 76ers. So whomever comes out on top there, honestly, I do like to win the MVP. I don't think there's anybody in the West at this point because the Lakers have been so bad without AD, 3-6 in their last 9 since he, went down, and the offense and the defense just tailspin. In a way that even if they, turn it around when AD comes back, LeBron could average a triple-double the rest of the way. And to be honest, it'll all point back to the difference being AD was there for him. So, a couple guys that you could even look at in the West, Dame Lillard plus 2,000. That team is in 4th place in the West, and he is unbelievable right now. And then Donovan Mitchell for the Jazz. If you think they're going to keep that pace, they did take a little bit of a dip towards the end of that first half. But if you do think that they're likely to stay, on pace to be a top 1 or 2 seed in the West, Donovan Mitchell is going to be considered the best player on that team. And if he goes off, that is, possible. At plus 8,000 is obviously potentially worth sprinkling a little bit on. So, like we said, the MVP race we'll keep an eye on in terms of how those teams do, and then I'm looking for who's going to win the championship from there, right? And who do we like out of those teams of some of the guys we talked about? I think we'll remain talking about those teams in terms of the Nets, right, and see where they go. They're at plus 300 right now. I think we both like them as the best bet, the best odds for your money there. A team that I don't know who's going to stop them. No one's going to stop them on defense, and it's really going to be a matter of is that offense for the Nets going to overpower anything that you could throw at them on either side of the court. And I think the answer is yes, especially when you have three of the best clutch players in the NBA on one team, all can score, all can set up anybody on the floor. So, I'm really liking those teams. And the only other thing I will say is, once again, taking advantage of the Jazz, already sitting in a really good spot with a really good team. You can still get them at plus 800 for your money. So, with a team that's already proven to be one of the best in the NBA, if you think that they can keep that together and pull it together in the playoffs and in crunch time, then that plus 800 is pretty nice.
Yeah, I mean the Nets are really an acquirable piece away from being that kind of championship medal on both ends, right? They tried out Andre Robertson and Shumpert. They just let them go, but they're going to keep looking. And they just brought in Blake Griffin, who's not going to help on that end of the floor, but it shows kind of an aggressiveness from Sean Marks to try to get the right pieces around them and obviously win now, which they can do. And playing in the weaker conference, you got to like their chances to get there better than anyone in the West. In the West, I mean, the Phoenix Suns have been better than the Jazz lately. I think they are more sustainable from a leadership perspective, just with Chris Paul there. I think at plus 3,300, they are worth a small bet because we could just see those odds continue to drop they're finishing in the top three in the West. They've beaten the Clippers and Lakers recently. They've looked like the best team in the NBA leading into the break. I don't see why they are still getting that much disrespect. And the Sixers at plus 1,200. They haven't really shown up too much against the best teams. They did beat the Lakers at one point a couple weeks ago. I'm not necessarily sold, but I think the way Embiid plays and the way they can defend, there's a chance they knock off the Nets. And then, if they're in a series with the Lakers, that's just a dogfight for the finals. And I think the Sixers could pull that out.
I'm with it. Yeah, I think the Sixers are the only other team in the East we could consider at that point. As far as reaching the playoffs, there's a couple of good odds you can find, Nate, on DraftKings. I can just sort of say, I'm not really looking at this team in terms of reaching the playoffs, only because the Charlotte Hornets are only getting plus 160 on their money to make the playoffs. They currently sit, I think about a half a game out of that Eastern Conference playoff spot for the eighth spot. So that's not great, but I do like their uptick, and I do think that there's a possibility that they do win that division against the Heat, who are currently only half a game up on them. You get plus 800 at that point. I think you have a guy like Gordon Hayward leading, a bunch of young, really good, talented players, and then Terry Rozier making shots. LaMelo, obviously, we know what he's done since he's come into the starting role and really turned that team around entirely, at least on offense. So, I think as far as winning that division over a Heat team that who knows how injured they're going to continue to be, we'll see if they can turn around their season. But right now, where the momentum stands, plus 800 for them to win that division, I like. Anything there in that realm that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, this is an interesting bet this year, right? Because 7 through 10 are all going to have a shot at making
Yeah.
the playoffs. So I think when you look at a team that started slowly like the Wizards, they're probably going to be able to get into that play-in game if they continue their run. And they're a pretty clutch team lately. They have Bradley Beal down the stretch, so the Bulls also at plus 320 have been a pretty clutch team. I mean, they could wind up beating a team twice in a row to get in through that play-in. Those are long shots. I like the Knicks right now at even money, plus 106. I don't see why they're gonna fade away.
Totally.
And my best no bet is the Warriors, pretty much even money. The West is just so crowded, and there's some really good teams right behind them
Yeah,
that could
and they
easily
currently sit
knock
in
them
ninth. And I do want to clarify, everybody, Nate, that to make the playoffs, you need to win your play-in game, right? Qualifying for
Yes,
the play-in does not mean that you would win the bet if you bet on that team, right? They need to win their play-in game.
they have to be one of the 8 teams that get a first round series. And I mean, Steve Kerr's made clear, right, that he's not going to mortgage the future. He's not going to play Steph extra minutes. They're already eyeing when Klay Thompson can come back next year, and they're not going to go too hard to try to be the 8th seed and have a quick exit, right?
It's a good call.
And looking at our other awards, the ones we can kind of write off at this point: Rookie of the Year, LaMelo Ball, barring injury, that's his. Defensive Player of the Year, Rudy Gobert. As long as the Jazz stay hot, I think they give him that because they can't give anyone MVP consideration really on that team. And Jordan Clarkson probably going to rake in the Sixth Man of the Year award. I mean, that's probably even more of a sure bet than Gobert.
Yep.
But most improved player of the year, this one is intriguing. Is it not? I mean, we had for a while Jeremy Grant, Christian Wood was neck and neck in terms of being a favorite, but he's missed like 11 straight games, and the Rockets are terrible. He has no incentive to come back. Um, and Grant's been injured a little bit too. Jaylen Brown, who was our early season favorite, has let an injury slow him down. So I see an opening for Julius Randle. The question is just how you interpret this award, right? I mean, his jump from last year's numbers, 19, 9, and 3, is now he's up 23, 11, and 5. Not a huge jump. I mean, if you watch the eye test, he is a much better player, though, right? I mean, he's played the most minutes in the NBA total, and he's 11th in win shares. I don't see Jeremy Grant's name on any of those lists. I mean, yes, he has better numbers. He went from 12-3 to 23 and 5 on a really bad team, but his shooting percentages are down. I think, the savvy voter would say, like, look, I want a more efficient player than a really good player on a bad team.
Yep. And I think it's interesting because just like we've been speaking about with the other individual awards, this individual award is going to come down, in my opinion, to how the team of that player does. And this is an award that hasn't really ever been dependent upon that. It's really just who went from not being a super impactful NBA player to clearly leveling up a tier into a new realm where they're scoring way more points or they're impacting games in a way different way than they ever were, right? But this time, I think you're seeing even in who was voted into the All Star, who was selected by coaches, and then even Mike Conley replaced the late scratch of Ben Simmons. So you saw, the people who are picking these awards and sort of, incentivizing people to give them these awards. It's how their team is doing. You look at like the Jazz getting all those players in. You look at Julius Randle getting the respect because the Knicks are a completely different team. And I bring that logic into this award as well with Julius Randle at plus 500 still to win that award. Not only is he at least comparable individually to the numbers that Jeremy Grant's putting up, his team just went from a laughing stock to currently fifth seed in the Eastern Conference. And that's entirely predicated upon his, incredible turnaround and an uplift in performance. So I'm happy to ride that Julius Randle train. Obviously, a huge Knicks fan, and really think that he's the guy who deserves to show that he improved himself not only in his own game, but the way that he's leading a team to victory consistently this year. And I think that's awesome and that's huge. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah. Last is the Coach of the Year award, which
go ahead. Yeah.
isn't as fun to talk about, but it's related in the sense that, yeah, you talk about the Knicks turnaround, and Tom Thibodeau is sitting at plus 1,600. I don't understand why he's not the leading candidate for this award. I mean, he's completely turned that franchise around. He's not doing it with stars in any way, shape, or form. He's just doing it with gritty defensive play. So I like him, and I would not take Quinn Snyder as the favorite right now at minus 300. I would rather take Monty Williams at plus 450. He's the Suns coach, and the Suns, as we mentioned, eclipsing the Jazz. A little
Well
Walt
done.
Frazier for you.
Well done. I think same concept. Coach of the year. If you're right now, the favorites aren't even worth taking at their odds. Even if you were trying to hedge a bet, right? Jeremy Grant minus 250 for that most improved, and as you mentioned, Quinn Snyder minus 300 for Coach of the Year. Those favorites aren't even worth touching anywhere, even DraftKings or FanDuel as you see it. So yeah, love taking Tibbs as well. Another Nick guy, happy to do it. Nate, that's our episode for today on that. Those futures, and hopefully you guys got something out of that. Definitely like and subscribe, jump in those comments and let us know who you guys are looking at. We plan on keeping this video up, obviously, as it'll remain pretty relevant. So, but definitely watch those odds as they continue to move for each player and award, and as well as the teams as well. So we'll be doing that as well with you guys. And then moving forward, we will have something for you on that 2-game slate tomorrow. So check back in and we'll be there with you guys. All right.